the first titan. Before there was Carnegie steel, before there was Rockefeller oil, there was the iron grip of the Commodore. When we think of the men who built America, we often think of the late 19th century. But the blueprint for absolute corporate dominance, the playbook for crushing your rivals and buying up industries, was written decades earlier by one man, Cornelius Vanderbilt. He didn't just play the game of capitalism. He invented the ruthless version we know today. He was a foul-mouthed, uneducated brawler who believed that laws were just suggestions for people who weren't rich enough yet. By the time he died, he possessed more money than the entire United States Treasury. This is the story of the very first robber baron, a man who started with a $100 rowboat and ended up holding the entire American economy hostage. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born in 1794 in a small farming community in Staten Island, New York. He hated school. He hated farming. He only cared about one thing: moving fast and making money. At just 16 years old, he borrowed $100 from his mother to buy a small sailing boat. He started a ferry service transporting cargo and people across the New York harbor. He was aggressive. He worked 20 hours a day, and he would physically fight other boat captains for customers. Soon, sails were replaced by steam, and Vanderbilt saw the future. He didn't just want to own a steamboat. He wanted to destroy anyone else who owned one. His strategy was simple and brutal. He would enter a new river route, drop his ticket prices so low that he was actually losing money, and wait. His competitors, unable to match his prices, would bleed cash until they went bankrupt. Once they were dead, Vanderbilt would buy their boats for pennies and triple the ticket prices. When gold was discovered in California in 1848, the entire country went mad. Everyone wanted to get to the West Coast, but the journey by land was deadly and took months. Vanderbilt saw the ultimate opportunity. He set up a transit line through Nicaragua, taking passengers by ship from New York, across Central America, and up to San Francisco. It was faster and cheaper than any other route. It made him a millionaire many times over. But while Vanderbilt was away on a rare vacation in Europe, his business partners decided they didn't need him anymore. They betrayed him and tried to take over his transit company. When the Commodore found out, he didn't call his lawyers. He wrote them a short, terrifying letter that became legendary in American business. It read, "Gentlemen, you have undertaken to cheat me. I won't sue you, for the law's too slow. I'll ruin you." And he did. He immediately built a rival fleet, slashed prices to zero, and bled his former partners until their company completely collapsed. Nobody ever crossed the Commodore and survived. By the time the American Civil War broke out, Vanderbilt was the richest man in the country. He was in his late 60s. Most men would retire, but Vanderbilt was just getting started. He looked at the landscape of America and realized something profound. The era of the steamboat was dying. The future was iron and rails. In a move that shocked the business world, Vanderbilt sold off almost his entire massive fleet of ships and poured every single penny he had into railroads. He started buying up small, fragmented rail lines in New York. At the time, taking a train meant switching lines constantly, buying different tickets, and dealing with massive delays. Vanderbilt brought his ruthless efficiency to the tracks. He bought the lines, merged them, standardized them, and created a seamless empire, but not everyone wanted to sell to him, and that was a fatal mistake. Vanderbilt wanted to consolidate the New York Central Railroad, but the directors of the company refused to sell, and they arrogantly believed they could outsmart the old man. They forgot who they were dealing with. Vanderbilt owned the only railroad bridge that connected New York City to the rest of the country. So, in the middle of a freezing winter, he gave a simple order: close the bridge. Suddenly, no trains from the New York Central could enter the city. Millions of dollars of cargo sat rotting in the snow. Passengers were stranded. The stock price of the rival railroad went into a catastrophic freefall. The directors begged the government to intervene, but Vanderbilt simply laughed and said, "What do I care about the law? Ain't I got the power?" When the rival company's stock hit rock bottom, Vanderbilt swooped in, bought the majority of the shares for a fraction of their value, and reopened the bridge. He had just stolen a massive railway empire without firing a single bullet. But even titans can bleed. And Vanderbilt's absolute arrogance led him into the most infamous financial brawl in American history: the Erie Railroad War. Vanderbilt wanted the Erie Railroad to complete his monopoly. He started aggressively buying up shares on Wall Street. But the men running the Erie, a group of scammers including the notorious Jay Gould, realized what he was doing. Instead of fighting him fairly, they literally fired up a printing press in their basement and started printing thousands of fake, illegal shares of their own company, flooding the market. Vanderbilt kept buying, throwing millions of dollars into a black hole, not realizing the stock was entirely counterfeit. When Vanderbilt finally realized he was being scammed, he was furious. He sent the police to arrest them, but Gould and his partners escaped across the river to New Jersey, carrying suitcases stuffed with $7 million of Vanderbilt's cash. They used that money to bribe the state legislature to legalize their fake stock. It was the only time in his life Cornelius Vanderbilt was defeated. He walked away with a massive financial loss and a bitter lesson. There were new, younger sharks in the water, and they played even dirtier than he did. Despite the Erie disaster, Vanderbilt's empire was untouchable. To solidify his absolute dominance, he built a monument to himself in the heart of Manhattan, the Grand Central Depot. It was the largest enclosed space in the world at the time, a massive cathedral of iron and glass where all his train lines converged. It was a daily reminder to every citizen of New York that Vanderbilt owned the veins that kept the city alive. When Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877 at the age of 82, he was worth roughly $100 million. In today's money, that is equivalent to over $200 billion. But his final act was as ruthless as his business deals. He believed that splitting his fortune would destroy the empire, so he left 95% of his wealth to just one of his 13 children, his son William. He left his own wife and daughters with absolute pennies in comparison, sparking a bitter family lawsuit that dragged on for years. Cornelius Vanderbilt was the architect of the Gilded Age. He wasn't a philanthropist. He didn't build libraries or hospitals like Carnegie or Rockefeller. He built a machine designed solely to generate wealth and power. He proved to a young nation that in the brutal new world of industrial capitalism, being the smartest wasn't enough. You had to be the most vicious. He showed the men who came after him that if you have enough money, the law is just a minor inconvenience. Was the Commodore the visionary who modernized American transportation? Or was he simply the first great corporate tyrant? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark origins of American wealth, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history. See you next time.